Welcome to Echo, the podcast where we share our personal perspectives on questions about God, spirituality, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm Ryan Becker, your host. No matter who you are, we hope that you find value and encouragement through real discussions about real things. Let's jump in. Echo. Hey guys, welcome back to Echo. I'm Ryan Becker, your host. Just a quick disclaimer. We are recording season 2 in the Collegedale Seventh-day Adventist Church. So if this is your first time tuning in, you might hear some construction noises, anything like that. Just bear with us, please. It's just a part of the process. But I'm excited. Today I have two great guests with us, both Isa and Chris. So let's start with introductions. Isa, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am Isa Tavares. I am a communication studies major here at Southern, and I really like cheese.
Awesome. So do I. That's the Adventist way, right? We don't eat meat, so we just put cheese on everything. Cheese and salt. Those are... all right, Chris, what about you?
Hi, I'm Chris Sauve, and I am the associate pastor at Chattanooga First SDA Adventist Church, and my favorite author is Philip Yancey.
Ooh, all right. I see you. That's a good one. He's a good author. I remember reading his books.
She's good.
Yeah, fair. I actually thought you were going to say Ellen White for a second too. Every time I talk to Adventist pastor, that's the answer. My favorite author, or like that's the way that we quote people now as pastors, right? That's the way we quote Ellen White. One of my favorite authors. That way we get away from, it's hilarious to watch the hoops we jump through. But I understand why, but that's not the point of today's episode. So before I stay on that soapbox, today we're actually talking about something incredibly serious. And so I want to kind of set the tone in an as appropriate way as possible. So for our listener, this is to you right now. The three of us are potentially going to be sharing some really personal stuff, and we understand that you might be wrestling with some shame and some guilt today and in your life. And so the first thing that I want you to know as we talk about this is we are only sharing our experiences with it. So if there's anything you resonate with, hey, we're happy, we're glad that you maybe don't feel so alone in that struggle, but we want you to know that you are loved, you are valuable, and you matter. And the second thing we want you to know is that I think everyone experiences guilt and shame to some degree. So I don't want you to think that we're attacking you or we're jumping on you at all. This is not, we are never going to say that experiencing those things it means that there's something wrong with you. That's part of the human experience. So as we talk today, just keep those things in mind because I am excited about this conversation. I think we need to talk more about it and more intentionally about it. And so before I launch into our actual discussion, I want to give two quick operating definitions for these two things. Guilt is the difference between guilt and shame is this. Guilt is there's something wrong with what I've done. Shame is there's something wrong with me. Though that's mainly the difference. We experience guilt after we've done something wrong. We experience shame when we believe that there's something internally and integrally wrong with us. And often those two things go hand in hand. What I will say is because of the difference, sometimes guilt is actually a good thing, right? You should feel guilty when you do something wrong. But shame is never a good thing. Shaming someone into doing something is never a good thing. Shaming yourself is never a good thing. So, and sometimes we can feel guilty for the wrong things. And so guilt can be good and bad. Shame is almost always bad. I've never seen an instance where shame was a good thing. And so let's talk about this. When you hear guilt and shame, what are your initial thoughts on, like, when you hear those words, what do you think of?
I think that guilt precedes shame. After a long time feeling like you keep doing the same mistake over and over again, you start losing the hope that you can stop doing that, and you start believing that the problem's not actually on what you're doing, the problem's with you, and you're incapable of stopping that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I can see that. And I think there is room in guilt to understand why you might be doing something. But shame is the idea that, as you're expressing right now, shame is the idea that there's something broken in me that can't be fixed. So I'm going to keep doing this. That line is very fine. But you've expressed it, I think, pretty well. So that's good. I would definitely agree. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, these are two difficult things, especially for if you grew up in a legalistic home. Maybe you have an opposite problem if you grew up in more of a liberal, free home. But what I'm interested personally in more is finding a way to get over the shame aspect, and then also jump the hurdle of guilt, because you said that it preceded it. And so internally, because I've struggled with many different things throughout the entirety of my life. I have a very addictive personality.
Same here.
And so, yeah, it's sometimes a little too much.
Yeah.
Trust me, the Clash Royale thing right now is going crazy. But yeah, it's how do we deal with it? And I am always drawn back to 1 John 1:9. I'm already offering solutions. So
no, that's totally fine. It's a flowing conversation.
Yeah,
we'll be all over the place.
But yeah, I always just think of 1 John 1:9. But then there's times when I even I'll use that verse and I'll confess before the Lord, but yet I still feel the guilt and the shame. So for Christians, how do we get this monkey off of our back, especially shame?
Yeah, and so for context, 1 John 1:9, I believe that verse is, if we confess our sins, then he is faithful and just to forgive. Right? I'm correct on that, I think. Okay, so good. Sometimes I'm terrible at memory verses, but
okay.
When you said the word confess, I was like, oh, yeah, that one. And that is the question, right? How do we deal with the burdens that we're carrying? And I think for me, I'll give an example from my own journey. It's actually something I'm wrestling with right now. So when I was 17 and my dad passed away, I never really had a chance to grieve because several things happened to me right after that. And I went to college. I had a whole lot of other tragedies happen in my family and in friendships that same year. So I never really knew to take time to grieve. I never knew how to do that. I was 17. Like, what do I know? And what ended up happening is that grief ended up manifesting itself in a very strange way. Basically, what happened was, in an effort to kind of seize control of my grief, to say, like, you don't control me, I control you, what I and friends would start doing was making jokes about the situation. These were dad jokes, but not the kind of jokes that people like. And these jokes would make a lot of people uncomfortable, and I regretted saying them a lot. But there were times where I knew they were inappropriate to make, and but I somehow couldn't stop myself from doing it. And it became a shame spiral is what it did. The idea, not necessarily the jokes themselves, but I knew that I wasn't supposed to do it. I knew that they were coming out, and I felt like I was powerless to stop them. And it was this downhill spiral of, this is not okay. I'm not okay. What's wrong with me? Why do I keep making others uncomfortable and putting them in the same position I am? Why do I keep doing this? And one of the things, the solution for me was actually just straight up owning it. This is the truth that I know about shame. It exists and grows in the dark. And the only solution that I have ever seen to shame, I know we're only 8 minutes in, the only solution that I have ever seen to shame is by bringing it out into the light. And that means presenting it to someone that you trust. Which can be incredibly scary, because if you feel that way about you, you don't want someone else to feel that way about you, or you don't want them to know that part of you is real. And so that's why I think why I'm so thankful for the Christian journey, is because by definition we're supposed to be in community with one another and surrounding ourselves with people that we can be fully transparent with. And I don't think that happens necessarily in a church setting. I think our friends and our friendships become that church, and our family becomes that church in many ways. And so being able to own that and to say to someone like, look, this keeps happening. I don't know what's going on, and I feel terrible. Can you help me? Can you just sit with me as I try and figure this out? That was what stopped the spiral. And yeah, there were times where I still messed up and still do, but they helped me climb back out of it. If your voice is the one that's telling you that there's something wrong with you, then you need another voice that's telling you there's something right with you. And so you have to go outside of yourself. So that was kind of my experience. I don't know if you guys would be willing to share. It's totally cool if you don't want to. But if you are willing to share a moment where you've had to wrestle with shame, I think there's a lot to learn in sharing each other's stories. So the floor's open.
I think that whenever I wrestle with regretting mistakes and things that I don't necessarily feel comfortable opening up about, the first thing that comes to my mind is usually that verse that talks about how God locks our sins in a box and then throws them in the ocean. And it just gives me so much peace, because if God can do that, and if he forgives me, I can get to the point where I can forgive myself too. I think that always brings me a lot of comfort, because we're harder on ourselves than God is, you know?
Yeah.
And just remembering that every time that I feel bad about doing something, about running away from accepting something, which is the first step of changing it. Like you said, the spiral stopped going when you owned up to it. And I think that's so important, to have that person to talk to something about. And this might sound kind of weird, because the question, is there something wrong with me, sounds just terrible. But when you think about it, sometimes there is something wrong with you, and accepting that is going to allow you to actually fix it. So having someone to do what you said, tell you there is something right about you, but you also have to accept there might be something wrong with you. So I think acceptance comes a lot into getting to the point where you can forgive yourself just like God did.
Yeah, I think an example of that is the addictive personality that Chris and I have mentioned, is the idea that, yes, I understand there's something wrong with me. I have a tendency to do these things. Understanding that is a wrong part of me gives me the tools, or gives me a direction to go to find the tools I need to deal with that part of me. But understanding that I can conquer that is, I think, the difference, right? Is you see the things that are wrong with you as something that can be conquered through a number of different means, whether it is through community and through prayer and through Bible study and through lifestyle changes and habit changes. I think that's incredibly important. So thank you, Isa. Chris, what about you?
Oh, guilt. And shame. That's a fun one. Well, I feel it quite often today, and it's usually, especially coming from the pastoral side of things, from missed opportunities to share my faith. Like the other day, I was walking out of the elevator at East Erlanger, the hospital down off Gun Barrel, and this guy was talking about death, and I forgot why he was there. He was there for something. I think one of his family members was dying of cancer. And he was just talking about how scared he was to face death. And I knew in the back of my mind, I was like, I've grown up with this faith. I have this hope. This is the time to present. And then we got off the elevator, and he made a beeline for the cafeteria, and then I just walked right out the door. And I felt like, even to this day, I'll be honest with you, I'm still feeling like the guilt from that. And so this is the human disease right now.
Yeah.
Is guilt and shame. And I think, from reading the Bible, the way that you don't feel this is by not sinning.
Yeah. It's true. Well, and I think what guilt does is it motivates you to not do that again,
that's
right?
True.
Like that's what it does. So the fact that you're still feeling guilty about that missed opportunity may be the very motivation you need the next time.
True.
And perhaps the next time that moment happens, it could be, and like this is just me being hypothetical here. It could be that guy wouldn't have listened to you. but because the guilt you feel from missing that opportunity, the next time the guilt you feel drives you to have the conversation with someone else who would be receptive. And sometimes, like, I don't know how God works sometimes, but it could very well be that that's the case. There's any number of different ways that our guilt can serve as a motivator to do better, whereas shame always drives us further into shame. Shame wants to grow, and guilt calls us to be better. And so it is a fine line. It's incredibly difficult to walk. And I think the most important thing that we can do is to own it, to share it, to speak it, right? To speak it. I think sometimes God lets us get caught because it's the only thing that's going to break the cycle. True. Because if we won't tell someone else, fine, then he's going to let them experience it and see it. And it's the very person that you may need to get you the help that you need. So I think that happens. I want to change for our last little bit here, I want to change it from not necessarily how do we wrestle with shame, because I think we've done that, right? Go outside of yourself, pray, speak to God, right? Share that with God and be on that journey. But if you're a friend and someone comes to you with their guilt and their shame, how do you respond?
I had something really unexpected happen when I was younger back in Brazil. I had a friend in school who I wasn't super close with. I was class president, so I did have a relationship with a lot of the kids in my class, but I didn't necessarily have deep conversations with them all the time or anything like that, but they did feel like they were able to come and talk to me. So I had this one girlfriend come to me on this social media website that we had at the time. It doesn't exist anymore. But she said that she was suffering abuse from a relative in her family. And I had absolutely no idea how to approach that. I was, maybe 13, 14? I told my mom about it, and I didn't want to expose my friend, but at the same time, there wasn't anything I could do for her to fix her shame and her guilt for something that it wasn't even her own doing, was someone else's, without encouraging her to step out and talk to someone about it.
Yeah. So
I expressed to her my desire to help her and to be there for her if she needed to talk to me, but I also made clear that she needed to make the choice when she was ready to speak about it, to talk to someone who would be able to help her, like her family. This was one of the parts that hurt me the most, because she did say that she talked about it with her mom and she kind of didn't really do anything about it. So I think that as that friend, it's very important to be there for that person, to make that very clear that you are there anytime. Call me 3 a.m. in the morning. I'll talk to you, even if I don't exactly know what you're saying because I'm so sleepy. And to give that person direction, whatever solution that you think is best, pray about it so that you don't misguide them. But the third thing might be the hardest part, is that you also have to accept that you're not going to be that person's salvation. As much as you can do for them, it ultimately is going to be their choice how they're going to deal with the situation. So although we have to do everything we can, we also have to understand that we can only do so much.
Yeah, I think that last part, wow.
Yeah,
First of all, thank you for sharing that. That last part is incredibly powerful, because I think sometimes in trying to help our friends, we take their shame onto ourselves. Yeah. And Jesus is the only one who bears someone else's shame. And so we bear their shame, and then because we weren't able to help them, right, we then feel shame and we feel terrible. I actually see this with friendships or not friendships, relationships. I've seen it in friendships too, where one person is suicidal. And I've actually watched this happen where someone has died to suicide, and their significant other blames themselves.
Ooh, yeah.
Because they think, how did I miss it? Or what did I do wrong? Or And so we take someone else's shame and we think that we're responsible somehow for it. And that's not true. You can only do so much, and understanding your own limitations is incredibly, incredibly important. So thank you. Thank you for that. Chris, any thoughts here?
I don't know if I can get much better than that.
No, that was incredible. That really was.
It's not a competition.
Yeah, well, if it was, you'd be winning. So I think I would add to this that it is important to love them and to communicate that they are loved.
Oh, absolutely.
Communicate, hey, I love you. I want you to know. One of the things that I used to do, I sometimes still do it when I kind of feel convicted to, is to not just say, hey, I'm here for you if you need to talk, but actually to list out specific things. Because everyone thinks that their shame is the exception, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone thinks that my shame is the one thing that you wouldn't accept. So if I can somehow just cast this wide net, so I'll say, if you need to talk to me about alcohol, abuse, smoking, pornography, whatever it is, I am here for you, right? If I can list off things and somehow get their, catch what they're dealing with, then I say to them outright, yes, it is safe for you to talk to me about that, and it won't be the exception. And so I try to eliminate any possibility for that. And I don't do an accusatory and say, like, I think you're doing these things. I just want you to know that if any of those things are something you're struggling with, you can talk to me. And so, yeah, I think that I think that's another thing that can be done. And so any final thoughts kind of before we close out here? Perfect. Okay. No, we did it. To our listener, we want to say this. If you are experiencing shame and you are experiencing guilt, please reach out to someone you trust, whether it's someone older, someone who's walking alongside you. Reach out to someone, pray about it. If you are in a place where you're thinking about harming yourself or harming someone else, I am going to especially ask that you reach out for help. There is the National Suicide Hotline, and we'll put that link in the show notes for you. But talk to a parent, talk to a friend, talk to a pastor, a teacher, whoever it is that's been someone close to you. Reach out and ask for help. We want you to know that you are loved, that you are valuable because God created you, and for no other reason other than you are you. And I love that when the best way to be like God, right? If we are created in God's image, the best way to be like God is to be fully you. And so we want you to know that you are loved, you are valued, and we hope this conversation has been helpful to you. We hope it's been encouraging to you. Isa and Chris, thank you for sharing your experiences as well, your insights here. And thank you to Southern Adventist University for hosting us. If you want to engage with any other Project Refresh content, whether it's some of our blogs or other video content as well, you can head over to theprojectrefresh.org. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Echo. We hope you enjoyed it. To stay up to date with new episodes as we release them, and for more awesome content from Project Refresh, a ministry of the Carolina Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. And don't forget to like and leave a comment.